I saw the Mourne Mountains in the mist. It was a Friday, just after the rain had passed, and the clouds were still clinging to the peaks, like a shroud over a corpse. I was young then, just 15, but already too familiar with the violent world of Northern Ireland, a world that made your skin crawl and your heart beat like a drum at night. The troubles were in full swing, and the air was thick with fear, suspicion, and the crackle of gunfire. It was my Uncle Dan who first took me to the mountains. He was a quiet man, the kind whose silence made you nervous, as if he were hiding something just out of reach. He was a big man, broad-shouldered with hands that looked like they could break a neck in a second. I'd always known that Dan was involved in things my mother warned me to stay away from, even if she didn't say it outright. "We're going to the mountains of Mourne tomorrow at dusk," he'd said, his voice low and grave, like a whisper from the grave itself. "Some business that needs attending to." I didn't ask questions. No one did, not with the way things were at the time. My cousins had been involved with the IRA for years, but Dan, though he wasn't as vocal about it, was tied to the underground in ways most people couldn't imagine. I just knew that if he said business, you did it, no matter what. His calls were cryptic, but they were never ignored. We drove out of Belfast in the early evening, the sky darkening like the bruises on a child's skin. As we got closer to the mountains, the landscape began to twist and change. The rolling hills gave way to jagged rocks and cliffs that seemed to claw at the sky. It was like a place out of time, untouched by anything human. We parked the car by a small stone wall, the engine's dying hum mixing with the faint sounds of birds calling from the trees. Dan didn't say a word as we climbed over the wall and made our way up the rough path that led into the hills. The air was colder now, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise. We passed the ruins of old stone cottages, their windows shattered, their roofs caved in. Remnants of a time long gone, but not a time before the British had come, I knew. Every step seemed to echo in the emptiness, like the mountains themselves were watching us. Eventually, after a long, wordless hike, we went off the course up to the peak, instead veering into the woods in a slightly flatter area. A few minutes later, we reached a small clearing, a patch of land where the grass grew tall and wild. There were trees in every direction,